Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Reckie. I wanted to welcome you all to this Space Nation Universal Citizenship panel. Excited to have all of you here. I'm Jill Reckie. I'm the head of the Space Nation Spaceport and Member Experiences, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. I want to give you a big shout out to all the Space Nation members that are on our call today. Good to see you. And welcome to all of those who are joining for the first time as we define what universal citizenship means with our amazing group of space pioneers that have joined us. Please go ahead and say hello in the chat as everyone's kind of getting oriented here, and tell us where you're joining from if you want. And if you want to tell us why you're here, what you're excited about, we'd love to hear that too. Stefan Reckie is our Universal Sales Director, and he will be monitoring the chat. So we want to make sure that you can make comments and be prepared to ask questions there as well. So welcome. On behalf of myself and the Space Nation leadership team, I want to welcome you to our first public Lost in Space conversation. How can space exploration help us to become universal citizens? Lost in Space calls are something we do to convene the public and the members with space pioneers. We want to have really thought-provoking conversations. We hold these once a month on Fridays as a way of getting lost for the weekend, because we want you to think about this conversation way after this call is over and continue amongst yourselves to contemplate some of the topics so we can further our thinking. Space Nation exists to help its members from all over the world explore new frontiers, expand their mindsets, and evolve together into universal citizens. They seek to understand the human aspects of space exploration and the impact on our current society here on Earth, as well as future civilizations in the universe. So we're really thinking about, how the human part of exploration, why it exists, what the impact is. Today, there exists a network of physical global spaceports, and we discovered a need to establish a virtual spaceport to give people a safe place to come together and do things without any limitations. So we do have a Space Nation spaceport, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But we want to also quickly get into the conversation because I know you're all eager to meet our panelists. So let's do that. Let's see, Stefan, I'm looking through the chat to see that we have quite a few people still telling us what they're thinking. A lot of people in the space industry here. A lot of people saying, greeting Earthlings, Dave from Redmond. And everyone who's joining, we're so excited to have you with us. All right, so let's meet our panelists and not delay any further. Greg, Jane, Nicole, and Steve, thank you for being with us. You can go ahead and turn on your videos if you'd like. And Greg, I want to introduce Greg Johnson. He's the Chief Space Advisor for Space Nation. He's also a veteran of NASA missions STS-123 and STS-134. He was the last NASA astronaut pilot of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. He's the former president and executive director of CASIS, which is the Center for Advancement of Science in Space, and he managed a US lab on the International Space Station. And the fun part is that Greg is also a musician, and if you ask him, he will tell you a really good story about playing his keyboard on the ISS in microgravity. Greg, do you want to go ahead and introduce the rest of the panelists?
Thanks, Jill. I'm really excited to be part of this panel. We're spread out all over the world. I think two of the panelists are in the same state, but we're all over the country. And this is a particularly exciting period of time for me personally and our crew of STS-134 because we were literally up in space 10 years ago. We launched on May 16th, and just yesterday we installed the AMS up there. And Nicole and others on the call know how magical it is. I think Roberto Vittori was going to try to join us today as well. But it's just such a wonderful place to be and to work and to live and to share with our crewmates and appreciate the wonderful planet that we've been able to live on for all these generations. So I'm humbled and honored to be on this panel. The panel, there's three big time experts here. I'm like the only person in this whole crowd who hasn't written a book. Nicole, she's written a book and she's very well known in the space community. Steve, you wrote The Obligation, and Jane, you wrote a book about biosphere as a minimum, Biosphere 2. And when I'm going to say a few more brag words about you all, and then you can maybe say 3 sentences about your first book. You might have multiples, but I've got to finish mine. I've been writing it for about 12 years. Each one of the people on the panel, we are friends, we're associates, and all three of them have either been my boss or wanted to be my boss. Jane at Worldview, Nicole, you were my boss when I left the Astronaut Corps, and Steve, you were heading up SpaceCom when I was working with that team. So I consider you all friends. Nicole obviously has flown over 100 days in space. Jane has spent 2 years on Biosphere 2. She's headed up lots of startups. Steve knows DC inner circle well. He has been involved in commercial space, global entrepreneurship, and then also nonprofit space. So I don't want to keep yakking. I'm really excited about these panelists. We come from different perspectives on the same topic, and that is of universal citizenship. So Jane, why don't you just give us a couple words about your book and what you think is the coolest thing that everybody should know? Space perspective, man.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Greg. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you might be on this beautiful planet. Yeah, thanks for introducing and plugging my book. Still available on Amazon. It's about my 2 years and 20 minutes inside Biosphere 2. It's called the Human Experiment. For reasons you might imagine, as we were in there for 2 years. And Biosphere 2, for those of you who do not remember what it is or was, because it is still around today. It's an awesome project in Arizona where 8 of us lived inside for 2 years. It was a prototype space base. It was a miniature version of planet Earth encapsulated in a 3-acre chamber that we all lived in. And we recycled all our air, our water, grew all our food, and in many ways had a very similar experience to the kind of experience we're going to be talking about today, this universal citizenship, this universal perspective. From inside Biosphere 2, where we could really see our biosphere in this case in the greater context of a planetary context, a geologic context, and now we're of course talking about it in the cosmic context. And that has led to what I'm doing today, Space Perspective, where we're making space really accessible and safe in ways that are not really available to most people, but we really want to make space accessible to a lot of people. We're using a space balloon to take people up to space in a pressurized capsule so it can really be gentle and comfortable so we can give as many people as possible the incredible experience in some ways that you guys have had, Box and Nicole. Awesome.
Okay, and so Jane, I think we heard a little bit of background noise. Everybody please mute your mics because there's about 120 of us on the call. And so should we shift to Jane? I don't want to stop you. Are you done, or do you want to keep going?
I could keep going forever, but let's say I'm done for now.
Okay, so Nicole, she's brought space art to the forefront. You've had an amazing career, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the Art Institute.
Yeah, and Jane, really thankful for that access you're going to provide, because I'm hopeful that I can hitch a ride with you someday too. And yeah, Box, you mentioned books. I'll just throw out there, if we're able to give a plug, I've just finished my first one. It's called Back to Earth. It's available for pre-order. Feel free to do that if you wish. Release on October 12th, but not a memoir, more a story of how the way we've discovered to very peacefully and successfully live and work together as an international community in space on board the space station is this really wonderful example of how we should be doing that same kind of thing down here on Spaceship Earth. I'll just tell you that since, my life now really has been, and in that book too, is about, sharing my spaceflight experience, I think in a way that hopefully encourages people to acknowledge what Dave mentioned in the comments about that you're Earthlings and this need to act and live like crewmates, not passengers. My passion project, as Box introduced, is, and since retiring from NASA 6 years ago, which I cannot believe it's been 6 years, is the work with a group called the Space for Art Foundation. And that's allowed me really to bring my love of space and art and healing together. And we like to say in the group that we're uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. And I believe it's right in line with what we're going to be talking about today with universal citizenship and essentially how we treat each other, all the other life on this planet, and the planet itself. So thank you.
And Steve, I think you can wrap it up for the intros.
Thank you, Greg. And I'm really humbled actually to be part of this group. And I'm happy to talk about my book. It also is available on Amazon and it's been out for a few years. The essence, the main takeaway from the obligation is this idea that that our march into space, this now that we're on the very threshold of expanding human life beyond Earth, becoming a multiplanetary species, it's not something that began 50 years ago or even 100 years ago. It actually is embedded in our DNA, and we can find evidence for this from the very beginning of humans' march to civilization, from the time that we first created a stone knife to cut the carcass, meat off the carcass, from the first time that we threw a first rock. That was our first. That was our first launching system to when we threw a rock with precision. So we've been on this march for a very long time, and I've articulated this in a novel form, in a nonfiction form. So certainly encourage you all to take a look at that. I am so passionate about everything that you guys are doing and are up to. I'm so I just have to briefly mention, when I was working in Congress, and we were putting forth an idea for the Space Settlement Act. It was the Biosphere 2 project that provided a huge amount of inspiration for us to move forward with that. So thank you, Jane. And even back then, we had those folks from the Biosphere 2 project involved with that. Right now, my biggest passion is the Beyond Earth Institute, an organization I helped to co-found last year that is focusing on building a policy framework that is going to allow us to create those communities beyond Earth that I'm talking about. So, and I'll leave it there, Greg. Thanks a lot. Look forward to the conversation.
And again, thank you all the panelists for joining us, as well as the Space Nation team. So off to you, Jill.
Okay, Greg, there is a question for Nicole from Matthew. He's wondering about the statue behind you. It says pretty cool astronaut statue in the background. Is there a story to that?
So this one, that's like really a statue. I'm like trying to do the thing backwards on the thing here. And then I got to refer to my robotic arm flying days, right? Or this one that's the colorful art spacesuit. Do you know which one?
We don't know, but I'm thinking on the big one behind you.
Well, I'll tell you. So the one over here is a small, beautiful statue by an artist named John Luis Gonzalez, who, check out his work, really does some wonderful art with astronauts, mostly colorful paintings with astronauts in suits holding on to flowers. And he did it's gorgeous bronze statue of it too. This is one of our art spacesuits from the Space for Art Foundation. This is our most recent one, named Exploration. And there's artwork in this suit that was sewn together by our real spacesuit company, ILC Dover, the spacesuit company. I'll just throw that out there. And they've been volunteering with us since the very beginning. But there's artwork from children in over 50 countries, from hospitals and refugee centers in those countries, and all pulled together into this beautiful art spacesuit. Some of the ones that we've created before have actually gotten to fly to the space station. There's some video online you can see of that. Just gorgeous. But it's why we like to say that we're uniting this planetary community of children, because it's really allowing them, through this inspiration of space, to kind of transcend these things they're going through that you hope are actually the worst things they ever have to deal with in their lives, and that they can have something like this that lets them think about their future too, which I think everybody on this call would agree that the idea of thinking about ourselves living on this planet, exploring space, settling off Earth is certainly an inspirational thing. I'm a rambler, sorry.
No, thanks, Nicole. We all are. That's the problem. But it's also the joy of doing this is we get to see a little peek into your lives, and we can see into your homes, and it's so exciting for all of us. I can see Matthew's face. I think it's Matthew in the center who asked the question and just beaming. So remember that you're making an enormous impact on everybody here, and we're so grateful. So before I could go on, because there are other people asking all kinds of questions. People saying we love your book. It's an awesome book, and they're talking about all of you. So. We'll make sure if you look in the invite that you got in the bios, a lot of the links to those books were in there, but we'll make sure that you get them in the follow-up as well. So thanks, Greg, for the great introduction, and everyone, Jane, Nicole, and Steve. We're going to move now to just a brief, quick definition of what we mean by universal citizenship, just to frame the conversation, because part of the reason we're here today is to be able to have you help us shape the discussion and be a part of the future of where this heads, because it is something that will probably be dynamic and evolving over time. It's not something we know the answer to. We're asking really good questions, and that's sort of, it's sort of at the basis and the essence of what we're trying to do at Space Nation, is ask really good questions. So let me play a little bit with your minds here, and ask a few questions. How many of you have a point of view? So all of us, right? Some of us have too many, right? But we're all shaped by our experiences. We have a point of view. Now, how many of you know somebody that has a world view? Yes, we may know some of them, and maybe we ourselves have traveled and been exposed to different ideas and cultures and environments that have given us this more worldly perspective. But how many of you know someone that truly has a universal view? Someone that thinks beyond national borders and ethnicities and race and really gets to the, the feeling of a common humanity? Probably fewer. Now, so a lot of people on this call are raising their hands. It is a very international audience. And so we love that you've joined us for this, but it is very uncommon for people to have that kind of point of view. And so what we want, it sort of reminds me of that famous Apollo 8 Earthrise photo taken by Bill Anders. We came all this way to explore the moon, and instead we ended up learning about Earth. Is that an aspect maybe of what a universal view is, looking at Earth from space and not just looking at space from Earth? At Space Nation, we think so. We believe that's true. And it's both an individual and a collective endeavor. So there are complexities. It's about humans, right? So there's going to always be a lot of complexities. We each get to decide what we believe and don't believe. We form our own perspectives. And yet everything we do is inextricably, thank you, interconnected with each other. Our common denominator is that we're all human. Space Nation members are really curious about the human aspects of space exploration and about the future of spacefaring people. We use outer space as a lens, so we're not, I made a whole list of things that we're not, and I think that's useful, but for this conversation, we want to think about universal citizenship does not mean that we are seeking a universal way of thinking or promoting one perspective as a single answer to really big questions. And in fact, I think it's exactly the opposite. We mean universal in the sense that each of us is thinking beyond this world or this planet Earth and considering the vastness of space, because that's where the possibilities lie for new and novel approaches to humanity and to future civilizations. Our biggest challenges today can be reconsidered as we go further together and explore the unknown. We really believe that by defining what it means to be a universal citizen and giving people a way to practice new habits and routines, sharing accountability and progress along the way, that we can make a positive impact on the future of humanity and leave a legacy of knowledge about what it means to be humans to serve other future leaders that are part of a spacefaring people. It's a big, big thing. This is a big conversation. So sit back and buckle up and let's get a little deep. Let's go to deep space. I'm going to shift a bit now and tell you a little bit of logistical about how this is going to work, and then we'll get into our questions. So I will ask our panelists 3 big questions about what it means to be a universal citizen. We're framing the conversation using these questions just so that you as participants can help us shape the concepts, as I mentioned before, clarify the language, and help you find ways to apply these concepts in your lives. We have hundreds of people on this call, so obviously we're asking you to use the chat to share anything relevant, and you're already doing it, but think about it now. So start putting your thoughts together, and when the questions are asked, you too can participate, and we'll be pulling out what seems most relevant and interesting for our discussion. Make sense? All right, let's get started. So there are 3 questions. We'll spend 10 minutes on each, and I'm going to run through them real quick, and then we'll go one by one. The first question is, as a universal citizen, why do we need to unlearn what we know for sure? We'll explain that in a bit. As question 2 is, as a universal citizen, how can we discover uncommon common sense? And then question number 3 is, as a universal citizen, what steps did you take to make a big leap? What small steps did you take to make a big leap? It'll make sense in a minute. Okay, so question number 1. So here we go, panelists. We must care for our inner spaces as individuals before we can go into outer space and make a positive social impact. This is how we continue to learn, grow, and achieve lasting results. So let me restate question 1. As a universal citizen, why do we need to unlearn what we know for sure? And I think I'll start with Nicole.
Well, thanks. First of all, I want to say, I love the response to the universal, anybody know anyone with a universal view? Because I don't know, I just get the sense that it might be more common than we like to think. And perhaps, it's because we're, this group of people that we're with, who are already like aware and understand, I think the bigger ideas behind space exploration. And when we come together like this, we can lift that universal perspective up, I think, and then we can help each other find ways to spread it to more and more of our fellow Earthlings so that it spreads in a good way. But that's not the question. I'm sorry. I think that we always need just to keep our hearts and our minds open to new perspective. Because when we do that, not only do we learn more about what we thought we already knew a lot about, but maybe even more importantly, we're open to this very positive influence of the awe and wonder that surrounds us every day right here on Earth. And I think this puts us into kind of a regenerative circle of appreciation and awareness, and then taking action based on that. And to me, it's a lot like, the experience on the International Space Station. We build this laboratory in space because we can take gravity out of the equation, and we can study things, even simple things, in a way that allows us to learn more about them than we thought when we thought we knew a lot about them already. And all of it ultimately is with the goal of improving life here on Earth. And then, you take the view out the window too. And I mean, imagine if we looked out the windows of our space shuttle or our space station, or through Jane's beautiful balloon capsule that's going to take you, to space. And we just looked out and we just said, oh, there's Africa, there's New Zealand, isn't that pretty? But we didn't really take it in with our hearts and our minds. If we didn't also acknowledge the very, I think, personal connection to the planet itself and everything we see below us. And I think it would be like turning off our humanity switch. And I don't know how many of you out there, have gotten sucked into this show called Vampire Diaries like I have. But turning off your humanity switch, not a good thing. And so I think being open to the awe and wonder and the looking at things in new ways is what being human is all about. It's what allows us to behave in a way of respect for each other, of respect for our planetary home and for all the life we share it with. And I think it's just really that driving force behind what being a universal citizen will be.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. I think that word awe and wonder that you used in your introduction, awe is a bit of humility, isn't it? And wonder is a bit of imagination, and that means you don't know everything. I think the most intelligent people are the ones who realize how little they know. Right. I'm just going to interject one from Shan, one concept here, or sorry, question here from Shan, who asks, do you think the privatization of space exploration will have a positive impact on universal mindsets and citizenships by reducing the role of national governments, or could distract us with egos like gurus, even mired in commercial imperatives? Good question, Shan.
Well, I think you're going to find egos. You're going to find the varying personalities in any walk of life. But this is a natural evolution. And just like any other form of transportation, the government paved the way, but it's the commercial companies, it's the universal citizens of the world that have to own it. And it's not just the government's job. The government gets us started, mitigates risk. But these personalities are change makers. They're disruptive. And this is exactly that's going to I'm a great optimist, and I just can't imagine that the outcomes won't benefit all of us in the future. And I saw Jane really nodding her head.
Yeah, so obviously, because I'm part of the commercial space movement, shall we call it, I'm a huge proponent of it, and I do think it's going to have a huge positive impact. I think it's really interesting. We in this sort of rarefied atmosphere of the space community, we are talking more and more about the extraordinary experience that you guys, Nicole and Box, have had. And it's not just of seeing our Earth in space, it's sort of an experiencing our Earth in space. I mean, it's all of you don't just talk about what you see, you talk about what you feel, what you've experienced, and how it affects you deeply. I mean, you all come back with, it seems from my conversations with you, with this really expanded view of our world, this expanded view of who we are as humanity on this beautiful planet that we live on. And so one of the things that commercial space is doing is taking more of us to space, making space more accessible, taking us further out into space. And that is absolutely going to have this increasing impact on us. That incredible image that we saw that was taken in the 60s of Earthrise. I mean, that has had this gigantic impact on our psyche as a species. And now imagine if we have millions of people who have had the same experience that Box and Nicole have had. I mean, this is going to ripple through society in very meaningful ways. And so I think it's huge that we're seeing the kind of exploration that we are with commercial space, being able to go where we are going in space. It's huge.
Thanks, Jane. And everybody, I think we're ready for question 2. It was a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about next, because we start with our inner space, meaning ourselves, the way that we hold ourselves. If we're closed down, if we're rigid, what are we missing? And question number 2 leads us next to the next step. It's not linear. It's a dynamic, always flowing thing happening simultaneously. But there's this need, after we really go deeply inside ourselves, there's this need to really hear from other people, right? You probably have heard someone explain their point of view and it made you confused at first, or you thought they were wrong, but you didn't say anything. You're just like, they don't really know. But then you shifted your thinking ever so slightly, and it shed like a whole new light on the subject, right? If you're just into that openness and that keeping things humble, and that inner, reflection, you can get that shift. And so question number 2 is, as the universal citizen, how can we discover the uncommon common sense? And we can start with this one. Well, whoever feels inspired to speak is fine.
Well, I will. I'll take a crack at that. I just want to say that this whole notion of us being an evolved sense of understanding our universal citizenship, and many of the people on this call, I would say that they're attracted to this kind of a meeting. I think that's why you see the kind of numbers that you have here. There is this appetite for us to understand and to connect with this very deep feeling of where we are. So that's why we're here. And I look at 100 years from now, to your point, Jill, 100 years from now, when the first space settlers settlement is up and operating, it will be common sense, right, for humans to understand that we were meant to expand into outer space. Such ideas today are anything but common sense, right? Yeah. At least for most people. Certainly not people on this call, but I would say for the larger community. The challenge for us is or for those who are awake to this imperative to expand life beyond Earth, is to not only help raise consciousness of the population through these activities, and certainly you have some of the most strongest advocates and voices right on this call. The more the future of space migration can seem real and imminent, the more space settlement will become common sense. Right, common sense idea for everyone. And I just think that a good metaphor is a child that's developing, right? Up until a certain age, a child has no sense that they're ever going to leave the family, right? But there comes a point in their development where they start to realize that there is going to be a life for them beyond the family. And this is a good thing. And in a healthy family, this is planned for and we expect it, and the separation is very healthy. And so I think that's where we're kind of moving as a global family, if you will, into this point where we're recognizing that we're getting close to that point where at least a portion of our population is going to leave home, the home planet, if you will, and start a new life in other parts of the solar system and universe.
That's beautifully said, Steve. Beautiful.
So I wonder, I didn't wait to be called, I'm sorry, Jill, but I just wonder what the Europeans were thinking 5 or 6 centuries ago, when they're telling their friends, hey, I'm gonna go, to North America. Would that be like, common sense at the time? I don't think so. And when Christopher Columbus is talking to Queen Isabella and trying to get government subsidy to buy down the risk, think of all the commercial businesses that have been created over the last 5 or 6 centuries with trade and all other businesses that started with government subsidy. And now it's very common. I mean, hey, I'm going to the States for holiday. Oh, of course. Now just think about how it's going to be in another 500 years with space. I think it'll be the same.
I love that. I think there's another aspect of this too that we can weave in, which is, the idea that Jane was getting at, which is widening our perspectives. You're all alluding to it. We were talking at Space Nation a lot about duality of vision, and the idea came up because every time I had a conversation with our captain, CEO, and co-founder Kale, it was about, it's not one or the other, it's both. He would say it's not global or local, it's both. And it's not going to outer space to leave Earth. It's also to help our quality of life here on Earth, to do things in space that will help people here, like grow heart valves. that we can then implant in people and save their lives. So there was all this back and forth about how divisive we are as a world population with the pandemic, with the pressures of race, all of the things that are going on in our world, and how we've got to be one or the other. You got to be for it or against it, for Black Lives Matter or against it. You know, you got to take a stand, you got to pick a side. There's them and us. And it seems like this community and this universal citizenship could be, although very idealistic, a framework from which we can say, no, it's not. It could be somewhere, the solution could be somewhere in the middle. And maybe this is where we need to widen our perspective, talk to people who aren't like us, don't look like us, don't think like us, and not be threatened by that, and listen and learn from each other, because we do have that common denominator. So Kali wrote a beautiful thought leadership piece on this called Universal Citizenship, 14 Billion Years in the Making. And we'll make that available to you. It is on the spaceport for the members. And a lot of people have read that and had awesome conversation. So I wanted to throw that in. And also I want to ask to get back to the questions here, because there are now 3 in my queue to bring up, if that's all right with the panelists. Let's hear from the audience. So let's see, Aisha. Aisha says, and she's a Space Nation member and artist, Nicole, as well. She does space art. I think observing nature can help us realize our full potential and think in alignment with the flow of nature. Common sense is just the presence of mind in a particular situation, which is necessary in any walk of life. I think observing can help a lot, the way it did help our ancestors to invent and discover. And Aisha is from Saudi Arabia, and she's on.
Well, I mean, I think that's beautifully stated. I agree. I mean, I think when we think about like this, looking through the window, you know, Box, remember, I mean, like face planted, whether it was a shuttle window or, you know, in the cupola, this bay window, this horizon to horizon view of Earth below you. I mean, you're looking at a planet. I mean, it's where there's this reality check of who and where we all are, right? And this notion that we don't, I think, consider very often in our daily lives, like, holy moly, I live on a planet. That's a pretty big deal. And, you know, when you really think about it, and that view out the window was like our ultimate connection to nature, to, you know, what we know of a place that like sustains our life, which I think is what nature is all about. And in this past year, where we've all been in isolation in one form or another, you know, I'm sitting in my office, I'm very fortunate. I have a window that looks out on some water in my garden. And I feel the same way, really, in this place, looking out this window, if I allow myself to, as I did, you know, with that all, looking out the window at the planet below me and just respecting it and being amazed by it from a little bit different perspective. And I think that's what, you know, nature is a very healing thing. It's what we've got going on with the suits with the kids. It's like, it's this connection that we can make to something that's surrounding us every day. And somehow we just kind of forget, I'm on a planet that's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. I just forget about that, right? I'm just standing here. And so I think we need to open ourselves up to like sucking a little bit more of that in. And I hope everybody on this call has been doing that during this, you know, past year or so, of where we've, you know, struggled in other ways, but we have the opportunity, I think, to look around ourselves a little bit differently too.
Yeah, so I think, Jill, do you mind if I jump in?
Oh, Jane, please jump in.
So I'm totally with you, Nicole. I have not yet had the opportunity to see the Earth from space, but I did have the opportunity to be embedded in a biosphere, and completely embedded, and in this biosphere, we were reliant on the plants around us for our oxygen, and the plants around us were reliant on us for some of our CO2. And, you know, and there was this complete give and take. We actually came to think of Biosphere 2 as the 9th Biospherian. We called ourselves Biospherians. There were 8 of us in there. So it became 9 of us in there because one of them was the biosphere. So we were so interconnected. And I think one of the experiences you get from really sort of communing with nature, as Aisha was talking about, is one of interconnectedness. This seems to be also a common theme through a lot of conversations I've had with astronauts. You really sort of understand at a deep visceral level the interconnectedness of our planet. And that's a huge part of this experience, I think. And I think it's become, you know, I mean, even in the last year, it has become so incredibly viscerally clear that we're also interconnected on this planet. And putting it then in the context, I love this notion of putting it in the context of the cosmos. And, you know, what I love about space is that it sort of drives us to think in ever bigger concepts. And astrobiology is such an awesome concept to think about too, because it's thinking about life in the largest context possible, right? All the way from where it originated to where it could possibly live elsewhere in the universe. And so that in and of itself helps us think about who we are and our place in this cosmos in such a different and interconnected, perhaps challenging and also somehow comforting way.
You keep giving me these awesome segues. I just want to say, this is the question 3. It is about being a universal citizen is a journey we take alone, but we need others to help encourage and hold us accountable along the way. It takes practice to live our universal citizen values in our everyday situations. Doing this consistently over time is what makes the leap possible. And the question is, as a universal citizen, what small steps did you take to make a big leap? And this has to do with creating that ripple effect in people's lives and not even knowing that, you know, you didn't even know you did it because you were just so focused on your own perspective and widening your view and had good intentions to become, you know, an important part of a group of people who were moving forward. And really just getting back to the fact that it's a journey on our inner space. Question 1, alone, we have to do this work ourselves, but then we know we need to listen to other people to broaden our view. And question number 3 being, and we need people to hold us accountable to get it done in our daily lives. Like, I love sitting in the garden and looking out the window, knowing that you were up in the cupola and now you're down here and you feel the same awe. Like, that to me is super inspiring. So how can we bring what we're learning from the perspective of space back to our regular daily lives and hold ourselves accountable for doing, being the best universal citizens we can? What are those set of values that will hold common? So that's question, it's a big one. Question 3, and I'll let, again, anybody can jump in. And again, we have so many great questions and comments on the chat that I can't get to, but we're going to continue this conversation. So go ahead. Who wants to jump in on question 3?
I can jump in again, but I don't want to be the only person jumping in. So
Because
what I'm doing is what I've been thinking about ever since I was in the biosphere, which is how do I get all of us up there so that we can have this experience that Box and Nicole have had, so that we, as many people as possible, can have this, right? And I think for us, what we're really thinking through is how do we help people make the most of this experience so that when they come back, it's not just a moment in time, but it is something that that lives with them forever, and that they then do something with. What I think that is so inspiring about conversations with astronauts is they're all doing something with that incredible experience. They're not just, sitting back. They're doing something. They're getting involved in their communities. They're starting organizations. They're involving people around the world. And I think that's, one of the things that I'm hoping comes out of what we're doing at Space Perspective is exactly that we are creating a really strong community of seekers and doers that are part of this way of thinking. I think it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we have, you remind me that what we're doing in space and how we're seeking to all kind of work to sort of get to that point where we can create the moment where humanity is actually creating new civilization. It's going to require all of us, certainly require astronauts, but there's so many folks at so many levels that are involved in this process. So it's not just about the entrepreneur CEOs and astronauts, but it's about the teachers, and it's about the advocates. It's about everyone, I think, who feels this impulse, and I call it an evolutionary impulse, has a role to play, has a unique role to play in helping us to advance this vision. So certainly all the folks listening here, regardless of where you're at in your life, you have an important role in this mission. And this piece of it, I think, is so important.
I love so many things that I've been hearing. Nicole and Jane. My older sister, she's an architect. She actually was the architect of a house next door here in Michigan. Windows all over it to see the beautiful lake. And between my 2 shuttle flights, the cupola was installed on space station. And my sister told me that a window is the most important part of a building. And when we were thinking about the priority of the modules being sent up to the space station, and we were 7+1 shuttle flights at one time, and the cupola didn't make the list. And my sister, well, it's the most important module. I didn't realize how right my big sister was until I actually sat out in the cupola and looked at our beautiful planet. And only then did I realize, once again, my big sister was right. A window is the most important part of a building. So Jill, are we answering question 3 about the small leaps to get a giant leap?
I think so. I'm going to summarize it up because we are a little behind, but I want to make sure that we don't go over for people, just to respect your time. This is not the last one of these we're going to have. But I do want to say something about small steps to a big leap. These 4 panelists and a lot of you on this call have taken really small steps. You had to start somewhere. They weren't always heroes with adventurous lives and risk taking and major impact on all of us, right? They started somewhere with the first step towards something that they believed in that could happen. And we're not talking about dreaming for dreaming's sake or escaping reality. We're talking about really wanting to make an impact on people's lives. And space exploration does that. Whereas, you know, we can build rockets, we can travel, we can get things from one place to another, but just like railroad tracks, it isn't the track and it isn't even the train. It's what's inside. It's the engineers. It's the stuff that where it's going and how people will use it and what it does for our quality of life. That's what matters. And so the small steps lead to a big leap if we keep focused. And our you know, wrapping this up, our duality of vision, or our second question was around keeping a wider view. It makes us challenge ourselves on this call to see these 4 panelists as not just heroes, but as people that have lives and they have challenges and they continue to learn and they continue to stay open. And boy, it'd be really easy for them to come and say the same old things that they say every day that they give a speech, because they talk a lot. And people, how many times, Greg, has somebody ask you, how do you pee in a spacesuit? I mean, that is like the biggest question, right? I think we're better than that. I think that's a really interesting question, but I think as humanity, we're just better than that, and we're bigger than that, and we really, we have more to do, and it's going to take all those people that aren't in the light necessarily, you know, and maybe some people who are just taking their first steps. And so I encourage you to think about these 3. I'm just going to summarize the 3 questions that we talked about, so so we can close up on time. We talked about question 1 was universal citizenship. Why do we need to unlearn what we know for sure? We'd like you to think about this as going into your inner space before you go to outer space. You know, before you think about anyone else or anything else, think about yourself. Question number 2 was, how can we discover uncommon common sense? And we want you to think about this like putting on a space helmet, looking through the visor, and discovering a much wider perspective. And if I would change that to find your favorite window, appreciate the architect who put it there, and stare out at wherever you are from whatever perspective you are in on this planet, and have that awe and wonder, but also look for the, you know, what's not common that can become common. I live on a lake. I look at nature and I see the cycles from season to season, from day to day. The sun goes up, the sun comes down, and how the animals work together or don't. And it widens my view as well. So, you know, you can do it here on Earth and still get that bigger leap. The small steps and big leap, remember our panelists as humans, and think about what's your next step. Like from a collective point of view, let's build spaceships that enable travel, but the act of space exploration is where universal citizens really make a big leap together. And that's the whole, you know, sum of at least where we were at with this conversation. And we'll look through all of your comments in the chat and make sure that we incorporate this into further conversations on the spaceport. I want to thank the panelists, Greg, Jane, Nicole, Steve. I hope that everyone felt engaged and in the moment here. It goes by so quickly, but thanks for being part of this moment. And it's just the beginning of a longer conversation. It's going to be up to each of you here, 107 of you, to keep this going. Talk to your friends, family, at the dinner table, kids, you know, whatever you can do to keep this conversation going. And we hope that you'll meet us at the spaceport and continue the conversation. Next steps. Look for an email in your inbox with some special opportunities from Space Nation by early next week. There'll be a link to this recording as well, so you can go back and see all your favorite people and hear the amazing stories all over again, so you can get lost in space, not just for a weekend, but for a month or more. And as a special offer, we want to give each of you a follow-up email with a link to a free 14-day trial to the Space Nation Premium Universal Network group. It's the first small step. This is a new community. It's got some really interesting and fun activities. And then we've also got an opportunity for you to think about joining us for our quest, which is an interactive role play with some scenario-based training. Can do it by yourself in a team, or you can have a whole group of people join you, almost like an escape room, and have a great time doing that and learn along the way. I want to leave you with this one comment, and then I'll let you go. This was a thought from a Space Nation member, Shauna, brand new to Space Nation. She completed her Space Nation quest to save the ISS experience. And she said, in a universe with a billion trillion stars, we're all stars. So I say to all of you, remember, you are a star. So shine brightly. So that's what I say. See you at the spaceport. I really want to ask the panelists if they have any like last minute things they want to say before we go. And thank you again, everybody, for your time. Greg, do you want to kick it off? Any last comments?
Yeah, I've been moving around the lake house here, but the lighting's not good. But yeah, I learn every time I share an audience with these sorts of people. I learn so many things, and it's such a treasure for me to hear Nicole, your stories, Jane, Steve, and thank you for joining on this session. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a great honor. Thanks so much for putting this together. It was really fun hearing all your perspectives and thoughts. And if folks want to find out more about what we're doing, you can go to spaceperspective.com.
And you can see behind her the exciting opportunity that awaits you.
Right.
Nicole?
I guess, yeah, just going in our order here. I like Boxa and Jane, I want to thank my fellow panelists here and for the work that you're doing. I think it really is expanding on, not just this idea we were talking about today, but just, how do we lift ourselves off the planet always with this, how do we bring it back to Earth, improve life here on Earth in mind. And Steve, with the Beyond Earth Institute, I really, with all of this coming together, we talked almost superficially really about a lot of this today, but there, God bless you, because there is so much that's going to have to go into this from the, just the process side, the regulatory side, the people side, all of it that, I wish you all the best in that. And then I just want to pass on, we go to space and it's a really complex thing to do, right? Everything about it, getting there, living there just for a little while, getting home safely. Jane, I am fairly certain that there are some complexities in what you are working on to get many people that experience. But it's funny, like the rocket is for the people. It's in all that complexity, to me, it came really back to 3 simple truths that I try to share with everyone now. And that's what I'd like to leave with you today, is like this whole idea of, wow, we live on a planet. We don't think about that very often, right? We're all Earthlings. Only border that matters, that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all. And most importantly, just like that star that Jill mentioned, that, the shining star is that, that we all are the crew of Spaceship Earth. So I ask you to be crew members. Don't be a passenger. That's what I'd like to close with. Steve?
I can't follow that.
Yeah.
That was great. But I do, and I'm sorry that I did not hear from Greg, how do you go to the bathroom in space, but that will have to wait for another time, I suppose. Thank you, Nicole, for mentioning the work of the Beyond Earth Institute, because I think that's specific to my closing message, which is kind of what I mentioned before, is each one of us finding that thing that we can do that can make a difference, right? So when I was of a certain age, I was going to be an astronaut, just like the guys on this call. That wasn't for me. So, I had to find out, well, what was that thing that I was going to contribute to this big mission? It turned out to be space policy. And when I was looking for how to contribute, now that I'm a little later in life, the opportunity for the Beyond Earth came to mind, and we wanted to focus on the policy issues affecting or related to developing communities beyond Earth. So anyway, my final message is for you all. Yes, we are all universal citizens. We are all crew members of Spaceship Earth, and join in this fabulous mission of creating human civilizations beyond Earth. It is going to be a fabulous next 1,000 years.
Thank you all so much. And we'll leave it at that. We're exactly on time. We so appreciate all your efforts and everyone on this call for the time you took to be here, for the thought you put into it. And let's continue to do this. We look forward to seeing you at the next Space Nation Lost in Space call. Now go get lost. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.